You can listen to The Front on your smart speaker every morning. To hear the latest episode, just say, "Play the news from The Australian."
From The Australian, here's what's on the front. I'm Claire Harvey. It's Friday, September 20. First pages, now walkie-talkies. The militant group Hezbollah in Lebanon is reeling from another Israeli attack on the lo-fi technology Hezbollah was using to avoid Israeli intelligence hacking into its smartphones. The remarkable spycraft behind the Mossad strike is live now at theaustralian.com.au. Keith Urban is the country music superstar who's most famous in this country for being married to Nicole Kidman and being recovered from substance addictions. But he's revealed in an interview with The Australian he'd much prefer to play to drunk crowds than sober ones. Today, why Urban is not the artist you think he is. There are some super famous amendments to the US Constitution. The right to bear arms, the freedom of speech. But if you keep going down to the 21st Amendment, you'll find the repeal of alcohol prohibition, back in 1933, ending 13 years of supposed sobriety. That ended the federal ban on booze, but states can still make their own rules. And there are still more than 500 counties across the United States that are dry. According to country music superstar Keith Urban, it's a real vibe killer.
You know, they have dry counties in America, places where they don't serve grog.
So you book around those
gigs
counties?
Are miserable. I'm like, for Jesus, would you guys go do something? Just something.
Urban spoke with The Australian's music writer Andrew McMillan on a recent trip back to his home state of Queensland, where he was promoting his new album, High. This is the same Keith Urban, by the way, who is mainly famous, in Australia at least, for being a recovered addict. His alcohol and cocaine addictions played out in the public eye over many years before he famously checked into rehab, not for the first time, in 2006.
Less than 4 months after his marriage to actress Nicole Kidman, country singer Keith Urban has checked himself into a rehab centre.
Urban says he's been clean ever since.
Over the years, I've talked very, very little to not at all about it. Mostly because I never want people thinking I'm against grog or drugs, which I'm not at all. I'm just allergic to them. That's it. So not good for me. Good for other people. I love playing to a drunk crowd, trust me. They're way more fun.
Keith Urban knows a thing or two about crowds. Over the past 20 years, he's played more than a dozen headlining tours around the United States, where he's lived for 3 decades, and the globe. But recently, he's been getting a little closer to the fans.
The sheer simplistic joy of playing that isn't about numbers or visual effects or anything. It's right back to the very, very foundation of it. Make sure it's solid. Make sure the players are good, the songs are good, everything's solid. And then we can start putting all the whipped cream back around it.
Andrew McMillan experienced it up close and personal.
It was held at a place called Lefty's Music Hall in Brisbane, which is a small room of about 300 people capacity. It's the sort of room that I very rarely go to because hardly any national touring acts book it, let alone international stadium-level headliners like Keith. So he clearly booked it as an underplay kind of show because he's the kind of guy who regularly sells out 10,000 capacity venues across town. And I just love the fact that this massive artist wants to do these kind of club shows, as he calls them, regularly, just as a way to stay hungry and to remind himself of what he used to do and why he loves doing what he does at the small scale and the large.
Yeah, and who's the crowd? Is it kind of your classic country fan?
He seems to reach across generations, across genders. He is the rare artist, I'd say, who's kind of for everyone. And that's probably something he's lucked into rather than tried to do. He writes these big anthemic choruses which sound great sung in a crowd of 300 or 10,000, as it turns out. But at his core, he's a showman, an entertainer. And seeing him in that tiny venue, either solo or with his three-piece band behind him, he owns the room. He has this incredible charisma, presence, and ability to control a crowd and to feed off their energy and to send it back to them. So I think he's one of the most extraordinary performers that Australia has produced.
The gig at Lefties was a return to his roots in more ways than one. Urban joked that he probably wouldn't play the crowd's requests, but he still had a crack at a handful of rock classics.
He is the rare performer who has his own chart-topping hits, particularly in the country realm, or in the country charts in the US. He's had many chart-toppers there, but he's not afraid, ashamed, or embarrassed to go back to his roots, which in his case involved playing the likes of Cold Chisel's Flame Trees, or The Angels' Am I Ever Gonna See Your Face Again? Songs which he no doubt played when he was coming up as an emerging, anonymous beer garden covers band performer here in Brisbane before he moved to the US in the early 1990s. So he threw in those kinds of songs as well as things like Bad Habits by Ed Sheeran and a pub classic staple like 500 Miles by the Proclaimers.
That's amazing.
A bit of Tom Petty too, which is, that's a song that you need to be a great singer to sing Free Falling, don't you?
And now I'm free.
That's right, it's a big open melody. It's the kind of song that people love to sing along to at all size crowds. And actually, when I interviewed him the morning after, we spoke a bit about the notion of singers getting older. And he said that Mick Jagger is someone that he admires, but Mick Jagger's vocal range or his recordings have been quite limited. He's almost talk singing throughout a lot of the Rolling Stones catalogue, whereas someone like Paul McCartney, who is also 81, I think the same age as Mick Jagger, he's someone who has these big open melodies in his career, and yet he continues to perform and to sing those big melodies at the same key that he recorded them in 60 years ago, which is extraordinary. So Keith is the kind of guy who admires those older performers, and he hopes to be one himself, I think. But he's only 56. He's got a few more decades to go before he's up to their age.
At that Brisbane gig, Urban donned some Lefties merch, joking between songs that he'd taken up a second job as a bartender. It's an unexpected gag coming from someone who's been sober as long as he has. Was he comfortable talking about that topic with you?
He was, and he made the analogy to guitar. Guitar repairing has got to such a point where sometimes if you snap the neck off a guitar, you can now glue it back together and it becomes stronger after the break, which I think is a great metaphor for what recovery can be for some people if they have the willingness and the support and the love around them, which Keith appears to do.
I loved his line too about he doesn't really like playing to sober crowds.
Yeah, that was quite a revealing comment, I thought. I mean, it was a very unrehearsed and unstage managed kind of comment because he's got a big crowd and, yeah, he does occasionally play in these dry counties in the US and he says that he'd rather play to the drunk people. And I guess that's also a straight line connection to what he did when he was a jobbing musician in Brisbane in the early 1990s. He was playing to a lot of people who probably didn't give a shit about the guy singing, playing guitar in the corner. But if he hit the right song, whether that was 500 Miles or Flame Trees or whatever else was popular at the time, they could suddenly find something to love in this guy.
Coming up, why you should be a Keith Urban fan. So he chipped away in those bars in Brisbane and then he started chipping away in the same kinds of bars in Nashville. And then he broke through in an absolutely massive way. So why? Why Keith Urban?
I think we shouldn't actually skirt over how long and hard that road was because that's something I was really fascinated to find when researching him ahead of our interview. He spent about 8 years in Nashville where he was just another guy with a guitar He could play guitar really well, but he was kind of a nobody for a long time. And it takes a lot of grit, guts, and determination to stick it out and to try to make that dream a reality. But he just had an idea of what he wanted his sound to be, and I guess just hoped that his songs would eventually connect with an audience. And through sheer persistence, perseverance, and raw talent, that eventually became the case.
He's released an 11th studio album, and it feels like everyone's going a bit country these days, from Beyonce to Post Malone. Andrew, what has Keith Urban got to say in this 11th album that's new or that's different, either for him or for country?
He's been an experimental country artist for longer than most people give him credit for, I think. I think it was about 10 years ago he started going beyond the realms of traditional acoustic guitar strummers with a bit of electric guitar and banjo to move into things like electronic music production, hip-hop style beats, incorporating female vocals regularly, guest stars. Like on his last album he had Pink. On this one he has Lainey Wilson, who is one of the younger emerging superstars of American country. So he's the kind of artist who is very much willing to collaborate with others. He doesn't want to play by himself in a room somewhere. He gets energy and inspiration from working with others, and he translates that into his songwriting.
If you were going to persuade someone to give Keith Urban a go, to listen to him and understand why he is this influential and long-standing artist of great success, what would the song be? Like, what's the song that sums up Keith Urban?
Somebody Like You.
Like you, I'm ready to love.
Which was one of the last songs he played at that tiny gig at Lefty's the other week. It's got a beautiful open sing-along chorus, it's got an incredible vibe and beat to it. It's one of his biggest, most popular songs, and it's a really upbeat, rocking song, and it's the one where everyone gets their phones out and lights up the room at the end of a Keith Urban gig, and they probably have for the last almost 20 years. So that's the one that I think, if you haven't heard him or taken him too seriously, give Somebody Like You a go.
Keith Urban's new album, High, is out now. He'll tour Australia's East Coast in mid-2025. Andrew McMillan is a music writer with The Australian. Thanks for joining us on The Front this week. Our team is Kristen Amiot, Jasper League, Leah Thamaglu, Tiffany Dimmack, Joshua Burton, and me, Claire Harvey.